All right. Suchita Senthil Kumar is a poet from Bengaluru, India. Her works have been published in Corvid Queen, Aster Lit, and Josephine Quarterly, among others. She makes life decisions by asking herself one question: will Bharathiyar, am I saying that right? Probably not saying that right. I'm sorry. Be proud. You can find her Instagram, Suchita Senthil Kumar on Twitter or Instagram, and then on Twitter it's just Suchita Senthil. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Atia Sattar, our other reader for today, is a Pakistani-born poet, teacher, and scholar whose writing has been supported by PEN America and Anaphora Arts, the Writers' Colony at Derry Hollow, Hypatia in the Woods. Her poetry has appeared in Rogue Agent, which has a Pushcart Nominations. Congratulations. Michigan Quarterly Review Mixtape, West Trade Review, Cathexis Northwest Press. Her essays have also been published in the popular and scholarly journals, including Lion's Roar, Tricycle, Academe, and Cambridge Quarterly for Healthcare Ethics. Wow, that's a lot. So proud. Her edited academic volume, How to Decolonize the Feminist and Queer Studies Classroom, is forthcoming in MP Press in 2025. She's an associate teaching professor of gender and sexuality studies at the University of Southern California. So, Suchita, I will send it off to you to begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, I want to apologize before, in case I'm sitting near the window, so there might be a lot of vehicles going around. So I want to apologize for that. Hello, and I am incredibly honored to be here and to have the opportunity to read some of my poems in front of you all today. So I will begin. Will we be having a screen sharing or something? Okay.
Yes, we can screen share. I will make you a co-host. Hold on. Spotlight for everyone for one, and then where is it at? Okay. As long can I tag you in for some help here?
Yes, if you scroll over to Tita's little box, it'll be asked to unmute and then 3 dots. Next to the 3 dots, there should be a little feature for make co-host.
You are good to screen share.
I hope my screen is visible. Okay. So this first poem is called Night Song, and I'll read it first and then give a little bit about how it began. So this one is Night Song. I wouldn't know where to start, the birth or the hunt, the flesh or its bones, the night a heart opened, then twisted into an eagle. I watch its wings thud against flight, a sound so awful in its unlikely grace. Sometimes old habits sing loud. If Icarus was a woman, she may have flown too close to the moon. What would have happened then? Medusa's stars peel their eyelashes, separate to unblink. I can't tell if this is what they call a twinkle. The moon undresses the sun from its skin, detangles its glow, and sits just as it is, a gun-metal stone. The bird almost flies past it. I think about the human heart, how, when still alive, its breathing looks so much like a cry for help. At dawn, the eagle rides into a woman. So this poem came to me around maybe perhaps a year back from now. There was this very gruesome murder of a woman that happened in India, in the city of Kolkata. She was a doctor and she was sexually harassed and killed, and her body was just left there. And it was very jarring to see like so many people, voice out their rage against this issue, but while still being the same kind of people who would, on an everyday basis, like show such misogynistic ideas in general. These were the same people that, on an average, would have the most harmful things to say about women. But when something like this happened, all of them were talking about how this was horrible. And it made me think about how we don't really fix the small issues. And when something like this happens, everyone is surprised that, crimes like this take place. But to me, it felt like, yeah, we live in a society where this is how we treat women on a daily basis. How are we going to fix such crimes if we don't start with the smallest things? I was trying to not think about these things and write towards something that might feel a little freeing, but this was what happened. Yeah. This next poem is called How to Grow Wildflowers, and it's a little lighter, but I was one of the most, one of the things that I have for me and my mother is our garden in our home. And most of our moments together are, watering it together and finding little flowers that we could plant and all of this. And so gardening has been a great, a thing that we have for each other. And I wrote this in the form of step-by-step procedure that we have on how to take care of flowers. So this one's called How to Grow Wildflowers. 1. Prepare the soil. Wildflowers will grow anywhere with sunlight. We sprout within the mother's liquor amni and then live to bleed her ancestry. Daughters will grow anywhere. We know how to make homes out of symmetries. 2. Scatter the seeds. Make sure they're not too close to each other because they'll end up killing each other. The worst thing we can be is to be like the other girls. It's tradition now. A woman's downfall is destined at the hands of another. 3. Compress seeds into soil. To achieve this, trample over them. The footprints of harsh slurs leave patterns across our chest. We learn to see ourselves in third person and smear the mirror worse. 4. Water the flowers. They don't need too much water to survive. When girls like us want to be loved, we have to tear open throats and drink it from there. 5. Remove the weeds. When the wildflowers have grown, pull out the weeds. Now, how do you differentiate between weed and wildflower? You ask our mothers. So these are some of the sort of stereotypes that you grew up hearing. When something goes wrong, people are so quick to say, oh yeah, a woman is the one that's going to bring down another woman. And growing up, you feel, oh, why are people telling me this? I don't want to believe that, because all the women around me are such wonderful people, and they might be rude, but why do we have to go down and say that, oh, but a woman is going to be the one that's going to bring you down? And we're sort of brought up in this kind of culture where, especially as a young girl, for me, a lot of times it was like, oh, I can't be like other women. I have to, I'm not like them. I'm definitely, you have some kind of stereotypes. And as you grow up, it's like, wait, but I am like every other woman that I've met. I am every single woman that I've met and loved. And it's something very powerful to sort of reclaim. So that was what I was trying to do with this. Okay, this next poem is called Self-Portrait as Punkurelli. And this, I need to give a little bit of context for this. So there is this series of novels by a very, very amazing author in Tamil. His name is Kalki, and he wrote the story, a fictionalized version of one of our kings here, of the Chora dynasty. And one of the main characters in this story is this girl. Her name is Poongurali. She isn't a part of the royal family. She is one of the fisherwomen, and she has the power to sort of maneuver the boat in like the worst storms. Even the men who have like the soldiers and the army men who have traditional training, even they get scared of the storm. This girl, she stands on the boat and she like can walk through any storm. That's the kind of person she is. So in the story, we see that she does not have time for people and they're flirting. She just knows what she wants to do and she goes forward with it. So her character is someone that really inspired me a lot. And this was who the poem was based after. Self-portrait as Poongurali. This world has many names for a woman who isn't a wife. My lovers arise from marshlands frothing into bubbles over my mouth. At night, I capture Chorapuram squalls and bottle them into conch shell caskets. They want to name me Princess of the Sea. Look at my boat, her bruised oars, how every hurricane knows to bow at my feet. Now, say the word. Call me king. This next poem is called Genesis, and faith is something that keeps coming back in my poems, and I've quite struggled with my idea of whether or not I believe in God, and if I do, how do I deal with like the details of it all? And one thing, like for a very long time, I was like, okay, I don't believe in God. And then the thing that really kept me going sometimes was thinking of God as a friend than some supreme power sometimes. And this is something that is quite, it's not something unheard of from where I come from, because some of like the gods that we see in our scriptures who are described as the most powerful beings, most omniscient and all that, we have songs by poets. And there is one poet who is writing to God saying, oh, you don't, you don't come in front of me. I want to see you. You're the God that I keep praying to, but you never come in front of me. We would think this would be like some kind of like respectful song, but he literally writes the song scolding God, saying, now you come in front of me or I will not talk to you ever again. So this is the kind of songs that I've sort of grown up hearing. And when I was really young and I would not listen to my mother, she would keep saying, oh, see, God is right here. And he's listening to his mother and he's brushing his teeth. So you should too. And so this is the kind of like, upbringing I had. And these are the songs that I've listened to. I know it can be a little like questionable for a lot of people when they see God as a human than the supreme being. But yeah, I mean well only. Okay, this is called Genesis. My father once said, when you cry, an entire village must cry with you. My limbs quiet and ugly, this sadness is too solitary to be any noble. I wish for the darkness beneath my eyes to wisp into a glow over my brows. At night, I pray for strength to sit with silence. This silence, the kind God feared at the start, forcing him to create the earth, just to have somewhere his knees could fall. A thud, something louder than his ache, and with that, the birth of the universe. How noble his grief. This is obviously like a very funny version of the Big Bang Theory. Okay. This poem is called Ars Poetica. Become the woman by the window, staring at her bones. Catch cigarettes falling from the sky with your tongue and let it wash away in the rain. Stitch korai mat edges onto your palms. Mistake a lone violin stringing for a doorbell. Watch yourself become the woman by the window. Fingerprints staining the clavicles, the carpals, the small bone that dangles by your throat. There is a throat, and it must be held. Always begin the search from inside a seashell. Learn to differentiate between the lament and the silence of the roaring conch. At night, turn your hair into a flame, the kind that burns its torch. Witness the same body in 4 different places, arched, twisted, forced in and out of grace. Capture the greatest horror, a human face through a camera lens. Pin its wings onto a photoresist board and turn anything that's left behind into words. A hand reaches out from a heart looking for something to hold on to. Now sit back and become the woman by the window staring at a pole. This is coming back to gardening with my mother. One of the things about the little garden that we have at home is that my mom found these electric lights that you can insert into the soil, which are solar powered, so they capture sunlight throughout the day, and once it becomes dark, they just light up by themselves, which is a small little joy that I have every time I walk into my balcony. So this poem is called Dead Little Things. My mother gathers electric starlight and sows them across the balcony. Plunge into soil, leave behind a flame. The same fingers snap the necks of garlic bulbs, unravel each layer of dead white skin over and over again. My mother has boxes. Black carrot scars, dried spinach leaves, garlic scales, and crushed eggshells. On weekends, she puts them together and feeds her jasmines and tomatoes. Sometimes she touches my forehead just to leave behind streaks of wet mud. When I become a mother, I too shall collect dead little things and birth life out of them. Okay, this final poem is Angry Women, the one that we were talking about in the beginning. While I did speak a little bit about it, one thing that I wanted to mention was there are a lot of these cycles of violence or whatever that we were talking about, and it takes one person to realize that and say, okay, I'm not doing this to my daughter. And I can see the way that my grandmother stood up and made a decision for my mother. I can see how my mother stood up and made a decision for me. My mother was one of the first few women to study in her town. She was the first few to move out of her town, while her cousin brothers chose to stay back. My mom was one of the few that were able to move out of the town and pursue higher studies, which was a very big thing for that family and even in the entire town. I'm thankful that I am so privileged and I have so many of these things and opportunities that my parents did not have. And it's all because at one point when there was a chance for some kind of cycle continuing, my mother put her hand and said, no, I'm not doing that to my daughter. So I think I'm just very thankful for all the women that have come before me and have decided that the future will not have to carry forward any of the past's trauma. And I hope to be that woman for the upcoming generations. So this is called Angry Women. In Tamil, we have words for harsh women. When in an argument with her in-laws, my mother calls herself before anyone else can. The act of wrenching an enemy's weapon and holding it over your chest, a slur, is a slur only as long as you refuse it. My mother named me Suchita, meaning she who bears a kind heart, hoping I'd grow with olive branches for hands, buds of jasmines for teeth, and a pearl sheen. Amma, I confuse kindness with submission, the same way you confuse power with anger. When I'm angry, I simply cry, retch my throat until it spits out sounds awfully similar to the syllables of my name. Amma, I have your nose, your eyes, your hair. Why is it a surprise I have your teeth too? Before a baby learns to speak, say amma. It needs its teeth grown. With every unpleasant retort of mine, you try placing marbles into my mouth. Once, as a child, my canines tore right into its eye. For a moment, weren't you proud? I wanted so much to not become that I became something worse. These people don't yet have a slur for a woman like me. Amma, kindness has taken me to all the wrong places. A hand around my throat, metal clanging in my ears, my body curled into a comma that refuses to move. Isn't all rigidity just tenderness gone sour? I know this because your calloused hands once felt soft over my forehead. I used to sing before my voice turned into this awful sound. Tell me, does a snake seethe its split tongue before biting its own tail? So that was it from me for today.
That was incredible. And I have to say, hearing you read Angry Woman, it invokes the same emotion, but it's even more powerful than the first time I've read it. Um, Thank you so much for reading. Thank you so much for being up with us at 4:30 in the morning. It's probably 5 now. It means so much to us. I will hand it over to Evelyn to start the Q&A, and that way we can learn more about your process and what inspired you to create these amazing, beautiful poems. Okay.
Yeah, hello. We'll keep it a little short so you can go to bed soon, because I'm sure you're quite tired. And I'm sure you have a big day ahead of you. So I'm just going to ask two questions, and then if people have questions for you from the audience, please either raise your hand or put them into the chat, and we can read them to share with Suchita. All right. Okay, so I'm curious, you talked a lot about the relationship with the women in your life and kind of how they have inspired these poems that you've shared. Is there anything kind of as you're moving forward in your poetic journey that has also been inspired by these relationships as well? Is there like a overarching project that you feel that you're working toward?
I think a lot of my poems that I've been writing recently are the ones that have been, there are a lot of incidents that happen in your family, and when you're growing up, you hear about them, and even more, you start witnessing these things. Recently, I've been working on exploring this sort of politics of space and how, as women, a lot of like, we have a lot of these it's, I don't know if it's common in every house, but these are very educated people. I don't know why they behave where when the women ask for their equal share in property, it's seen as such a big question. Oh, how can she ask for this? Why is she even asking for it? Why is she going behind money? And such kind of questions that come up. And that really brought me into thinking this is the same problem that my grandmother is going through, that my mother is going through. Hopefully, I don't have to, but we'll see about that. I'm currently in the middle of that situation, so I've been exploring like who gets to own land and who gets to have their name on these papers. And even when you go and stand there looking at this piece of land, this ancestral land, or even if you're going and buying that, it's almost impossible to get through with the whole process unscathed without a man by your side. So why do we have such a system set up, and how do you sort of navigate your space through this as a woman? This is something I've been working on as of now.
Okay, Aslan.
Yes, hi, Suchita. I I think in your bio, you said something about asking yourself the question if Bharathiyar would be proud. And am I correct in assuming that this is Subramia Bharati? For those online or perhaps in the Zoom that don't know, I mean, Bharati is one of the great Tamil poets, spoke dozens of languages, and just such a fascinating person. And I was reading in a journal a while back about um, how a lot of his poetry and prose poetry and writings would stem from he was a worshiper of Shakti, and he believed in women's emancipation. He was against the caste system, and so many of his writings kind of tapped into an area. Like he has very political poems and very religious poems and poems of love, and he's so prolific. And I'm curious how you, as you go about writing your work, if you get focused on one thing and write into that, or if you'll find your mind kind of swirling with many ideas and many concerns, and it all goes into one poem. I'm curious, that's just to say, where the poem arises for you. When you're going about your day, at what moment do you find, oh, I have something I need to write about?
That was a wonderful question. Thank you so much for calling back to Bharathiyar. Like you mentioned, he is one of the greatest poets in Tamil history, and a lot of his poems talk about political empowerment, women empowerment, and even though he was a part of some of the like upper castes, he always, through his poems, spoke about having no kind of caste discrimination. These were ideas that were radical and very, very unheard of at the time where he was alive and writing. And he died very young as well. Yeah, to answer your questions, I think mostly for me, it's usually like experiences like I see mostly it's usually comes from observation. I see certain things happening around me and I'm in the middle of some kind of experience, and the moment I can't really pinpoint like, oh, this is the moment that the poem comes, but it feels like I go through with months of things happening, and months of observation, more to say, and all of it just comes pouring down on one day. I like have to wait for it to like settle, and then it'll come to me. Sometimes it's more freer, more it just happens naturally. Other times it has to sit through, and I need to have sort of this clarity on what's happening to be able to write.
Okay, and we have to start at the section soon, but I wanted to ask one more question. Both womanhood and faith seem to be really important in your poetry. I guess I wanted to ask, where do you see the intersection between them? And do you ever find any conflict in writing about those types of things? Yeah.
Yeah, again, like a very, this is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot. I've noticed that in a lot of faiths, and I am answering this with my limited knowledge and observation of the faiths where I come from. I live in India, and we have almost any faith you think of it, we have people living here. And I've grown up with people who are I've grown up going, though I might come from a Hindu family, it's it's a part of our life for me to go to churches, to go to Jain temples. These are not things that, where I come from, Chidambaram, we have this tradition where this very famous Nawab, he was a king, and he prayed to one of our gods from my native town, and his son got better. And so he was very happy with this God, even though it isn't the God of his own faith. And to this day, when we have the festivals going on, they take the Hindu God and take it to the Dargah, and the people there pay their respects, and then this God is taken back. So this is the kind of culture that I've grown up with. And so one thing I have a lot of like fondness for like all the different faiths that we have. And yeah, it is very beautiful. And many people, even within India, are quite shocked to hear about this tradition when I tell them they're not, because there's a lot of like political strife and people using, it's very sort of known that people use religion in India for their politics. It's very unfortunate. And it's very heartbreaking to see it because I come from a place where this isn't how things are done. I've been brought up to love all religions, and I've been loved by people of other religions. So when I see this kind of political, like people using that to divide them, it's very heartbreaking. Yeah. One thing I've noticed as a woman, and I know a lot of people might disagree with me, I would be happy if people could say otherwise, but I've often felt like a lot of religion seems to be very, very man-made. And I've there are so many traditions that clearly are very removed from the original ideas of how a religion might be, but a lot of it is rooted in this sort of oppression of women. We see this in how people use the name of the Bible to, prevent women from getting abortions. In my own culture, we have this idea that women in their periods are impure and should not be touched. And they, like when you bring this up, people say, oh, but this tradition was started in order to protect women. We didn't want them to do work during their periods. That is why it started. But you don't really feel that when people are treating you like an untouchable when you're on your period. I come from a very privileged family where my parents did not make me go through such things. But even to this day, there are girls who are, removed from their homes, pushed into like secluded huts, and they have to live there with almost no like sanitation and all this, just because they're bleeding, which is very unfortunate. And all of this, like, how do you make a young girl go through something like this? You say, oh, it's in the name of God. This is how it is. God wants this, which is very unfortunate. So a lot of times, while there is a lot of faith that I cling on to for my own existence, there's also, I've found that for me to have faith and for me to move forward, I have to sort of remove myself from a lot of these traditions that people seem to be pushing on, which I'm pretty sure no God wants anyone to go through such things. If your God wants you to go through something like that, I that would not be God. Isn't he supposed to be this omniscient, present person? Like, he would not want you to go through such horrible things in his name. I'm very sure of that. So I found that for me to believe in faith and like to have faith, and for me to, I have to sort of remove myself from these traditions that are very harmful, that are clearly what people have brought up for their own good. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Also, I find I have the same issue because even though I haven't experienced it myself, you hear these stories, especially with the Christianity. I'm not getting into it, but there's a lot happening that can be devastating to women in general, especially when it comes to their bodies and their periods and pregnancy. But I'm not gonna keep going on about that because we'll be here all day because I can go on a rant. Thank you so much, Suchita, for coming here and for speaking with us and for sharing your poetry. It was haunting. It was beautiful. If you want to go now, you can go, or you can stay for the Tia section. We're getting ready to hop over there, and I will follow you on Instagram. So if you guys want to see Suchita's Instagram, it's in the little chat over there. If you scroll up, Instagram and Twitter. Ask them more questions. I mean, of course. So thank you again, Suchita. And Atia, if you're ready to start, we can begin.
Yep, I am ready. All right. Let me see. Okay, I still see. Sorry, hold on. There we go. I'm just not seeing myself on the screen, I think, is a.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
You
Okay.
see yourself?
Nope, it's good. Okay. Should be, yeah. Okay, cool. So thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing my work. So I'm working on a project that emerged when I was at my father's deathbed while I was 6 months pregnant with my second child. And so it was this very intense moment of feeling like I was holding space for both life and death. And a lot of my poems interrogate that. And also, this was in the US. My father was responsible for our migration to the US, or a lot of which I don't completely understand. So there's stories that died with him. And so the poems that I'm working on, and I'm working on a collection, really bring together stories of migration, of motherhood, and also what it means to raise brown children in the United States right now. So you'll get a little bit of all of those things. And so my first I'm not going to be projecting. I'm old school. I have my papers. So I am. So my first poem is also the title of my collection. It's titled Migrant Phylogeny. And it's an attempt to to create sort of an evolutionary mythology deriving from my dad. Migrant Phylogeny. Someday I will tell my children how their grandfather flung himself like a wave, like a seed, upon rock worn to dust, salt crusting his back as he dragged himself, four-limbed, to any future. Standing beside them, wet road in the shoals, I will profess how he burst upon land, breathless, to outpace extinction, swapping gills for lungs, stretching webs to digits, grasping at light so bright his offspring's eyes grew lids, how the earth still grinds itself for his arrival. I need my younglings to know when they can no longer walk untrailed amid the rooted trees, nor eat their fill in peace, they can come back to the water, slide tetrapod bellies into the deep, fuse fingers into fins. Their bodies remember how to reassemble to be free. This is another migration poem. Point of origin. When Dad teased I was found in a dumpster, I wondered how, even in jest, I was so easily conceived of dreams discarded. How his slender cumin hands laid claim to this muddy little form, shaped it in his image. How carefully he molded these hourglass fingers to readily sift time. How swiftly he set the 26 bones in these 2 feet to follow his dance from dumpster to house, through 10 cities and 4 countries, always searching for a place to call home. How Mother was never part of the formation. Did Dad conceive himself defining the contours of a new brown future? Self-starter that he was, carrying his pride plumb, while the baggage of family staggered behind, dredged in desert, doused in ocean, washing ashore, the color of muck and anticipation. And did he know there would be no renouncing dumpster? There would be no homecoming on a stolen land? Our bodies marked upon arrival as waste dwellers or divers, easily detected in response to the question, but where are you really from? So I've been experimenting with the duplex form, which is a form of a sonnet that has a lot of repetition, and I'm really loving the poems I've written in this form. So I'm going to share a couple of them. 46% of millennials are addicted to doom scrolling. I delete Instagram from my phone when the skies above Gaza kindle, when the children of Gaza kindle. I see myself in mothers cradling dead young, mothers cradling the white shrouds of their young, twisted at each end like candy wrappers, twisted at each end to hold them intact. I ease my daughter into her crib, watch her breathe with ease in the nest of her crib. I do not know how to keep her safe. I do not know when a crib becomes a cage. At the border, children slumber in cages. In the land of the free, they dream in cages. I delete Instagram from my phone. Attachment parenting. Sapling sucked from my flesh, soaked in longing. For 42 weeks, she gradually bloomed in a womb, grieving those who failed to form. How could she not always be yearning always for comfort in me? Every bruised petal, every scraped stem, I tend every bruised petal, every scraped stem. I cannot tell her need apart from mine. I cannot tell her my need to be needed. To mother her is to mother myself. To mother her is to forgive my mother. Now you know how much I love you, Mom tells me. Now I know who clung on for 42 weeks. Sapling, sucked from my flesh, soaked in longing. Thank you. And then the next several poems are about that intersection of life and death, of my father's dying and my second baby being born. This one is called On Airplanes, I Think About Dying. If you search online for whether you are more likely to die in an airplane crash or a shark attack, the answers are unclear and misleading. Statistics don't always measure one's chances of exposure. If you search for how likely you are to die of stage 4 lung cancer, the answers are much more definitive. 95% within 5 years. My father took to watching air disasters as he lay in bed secured to an oxygen mask, while the car wash down the street from me turned baby blue for Shark Week. Every detail included a t-shirt and sunglasses, but I couldn't bring myself to watch Shark Week that year. Now my daughter teaches me the ways of sharks: thresher, goblin, woebegong, Greenland, tiger, great white. Her favorite is the mako, the fastest at 45 miles an hour, but hardly comparable to an airplane. When she was a fry inside me, conceived the way of most sharks, we flew across the country 3 times in 3 months to visit her failing grandpa. We'd arrive unscathed each time, but she'd still thrash something fierce. Back then, I thought she heaved her gristle against my bones to help keep me afloat. I have since learned sharks are repelled by the scent of their own dead kin. So this next poem is actually very similar to Suchita's Ars Poetica. That's a set of instructions. And it's also a prose poem. So it's titled How to Write a Prose Poem After Your Father Dies. Zest your skin like a lemon. Sweep the zest into a dustpan. Collect your spit in a glass mason jar. Using your spit, adhere the zest into parchment. Pull its edges gently with your hands until you see stretch marks. Find the first pen your father ever gave you in the junk drawer of your past. Now hold the pen between the ring and baby toes of your left foot. While you dance, draw upon the parchment. Chant your name in your father tongue. Chant the names of your father, his parents, wife, children, siblings, pets and neighbors. Invite your inner demons. When you have danced yourself dizzy, assess your creation. Determine whether it looks like cancer. Repeat until it looks like cancer. Cry until the cancer spreads. While the parchment dries, go wash your face. Find and nurse your new baby. Do not ask her if you still taste sour. This last poem took me about 2 years to write, and it's a long one, and yeah, it just captures all. I am trying to write a poem about swimming. In this poem, I recall your stories of swimming. You, a young kid, jumping off a bridge into a river just as a corpse floated by, twisting your body so as not to drop another upon another's death. You, Urdu speaking, cigarette burns on skin, fleeing captivity from a land on fire, first by foot, then plunging into the Sutlej River, rushing onto a nation your father never wanted to call home. A newspaper recounted your amphibious arrival. You, diving from a ferry crossing the English Channel into Germany, a desperate stowaway who gets caught. Somewhere there is official documentation. In this poem, I try to understand your relationship to swimming, obligate ram ventilator, each stroke propelled by your will to live. How you taught me to swim by throwing me in the deep end, pushing gills to surface. I held fast to your back, remora to your shark, except this time, our streamlined frames cut through concrete and tile, cross national, continental, oceanic borders. This time we swim from Pakistan to England to UAE to Pakistan to America, landing in the shallows. I still do not know why. In this poem, I wonder if stability killed you, if we, your family, killed you. And not because we pulled the plug, but because you told me once that if you were to do it over, you would not have children. I wonder if lack of swimming is why your lungs became their very own pool, became their very own ocean, then cruelly forced us to watch you drown. In this poem, I marvel at the symmetry of fluid-filled forms concurrently bearing the future. I marvel at the symmetry of air surging through liquid lungs, traversing death and life. I grasp your hourglass fingers in almost identical fingers, comforted by swimming kin, my water womb a reservoir of untold family history. You submerge, and just a few months later, a new set of gills spills out of me, so slippery, yet latches tight to imbibe the nectar of life. In this poem, I wade through bodies of water, looking for you, Papa, Father, Walid, Bap, to materialize before me, to take legible form. I wade through the deluge of tears, holding a picture, letter, video, voicemail, a body, no longer a body, but a white porcelain urn, become goldfish bowl, overflowing with shape-shifting memory. In this poem, I remember I was 13 when I learned there was such a thing as a landlocked country, and it was confusing. I remember I was 18 when I learned there was such a thing as the dead man's float. I cannot forget I was 38 when the ground beneath me gave way to an ocean parched of your existence. I take swim lessons after you die. I fail to remember how a remora can swim even without her shark. In this poem, I look up the verb for swimming in Urdu and learn that terna means to swim and to float, denotes instances of bodies navigating water, whether dead or alive. You would agree sinking was never an option. I look up from the depths of my grieving mind and catch you taking shape as though in water, perpetually terte hue, I fantasize your ever-swimming spirit pausing to anoint the fingerling inside me when you died. In this poem, I throw the kitchen sink at the water breaking between my legs in an attempt to capture the significance of swimming, of inherited migration. I make a home in a city by the ocean, offer my children the gift of surface dwelling and question whether steadiness is a gift. I walk along the shores of the Pacific, mouth wide open, breathing vapor off the salty breeze. I do not ask myself if I have become the shark. In this poem, I taste again and again the only tear I ever witnessed breach the surface of your ever certain eyes. A briny defector from masculine composure, rolling softly down sallow brown cheek. You were saying you did not want to die. I cannot tell if the sorrow in my mouth is yours or mine. I jump into the deep. I keep writing this poem. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I need a breather. I felt entranced genuinely by that poem. Tears are coming to my eyes, so excuse me for taking a moment. That was incredible, Atia. Thank you guys. You guys are
Thank you.
both such amazing readers, and I just feel so blessed to have you guys here. Um, I'm gonna turn it over to Evelyn for questions. Um, but again, I feel so entranced. Thank you so much, Atia.
Thank you all. This was amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. Tia, I'm going to start with one question, and then um, if you want to ask a question, if you're on the Zoom, make sure to just raise your hand or throw the question into the chat so we can read it. So I want to talk about that last poem. That's such a beautiful poem. And it felt a lot like an Ars Poetica. It's keeps repeating, I'm trying to write a poem about swimming, and there's even a part later on where it says, in this poem, I throw the kitchen sink at the water breaking between my legs in an attempt to capture the significance of swimming, of inherited migration. Um, and I was curious if you'd be willing to talk about, for you, what is the difference between writing a poem and trying to write a poem? What is kind of the significance of trying?
I feel like it's all trying, isn't it? With this one, I wrote it so many times. I took swim lessons. My dad taught me how to swim, and after he died, I took swim lessons again. And at some point I realized, oh, this is interesting that I'm doing this again. And so I wanted to write this poem, and it was never right for over a year. And then I just had to sit down and be like, well, what am I actually trying to do here? And then I was like, oh, I'm trying to write a poem about swimming. And I think a lot of times, and this is a lot, that's part of my revision process now too, is looking at the thing that's been written and asking myself, but what am I trying to say? Is that even being said? Um, and, it's all kind of a struggle. It's all just, I was once at this session at AWP, and someone in the audience mentioned how sometimes writing a poem is just something that comes naturally, and at other times it's like ripping something from your, like ripping flesh from your bones. And this one was kind of like that. And that image really stuck with me. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? How do you ever know a poem is done? Like this one, I don't know if more stanzas will come, right? And they may.
Yeah, the experience of writing a long poem, I feel like it particularly is like that, where it feels kind of always unfinished, and um, I like how much it can contain. I feel like you're trying to contain a lot, which I think is amazing. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I have another very specific question. Aslan, raise their hand. Aslan, jump in there.
Hello. I was after Suchita's reading, I was like, okay, I got my crying out of the way, so like we're good to go. And then, whew,
Sorry.
so thank you for a second cry. That's probably the record for most cries in the day that I've had all summer. So very good. And something that I did not expect to be so moved by in both of your work, but specifically also in that last poem, I'm trying to write a poem about swimming. Assonance, consonants, these instances of specifically consonants is what I first heard, a lot of B's and D's. And I got this wave of like, I'm getting kind of teary now thinking about it. I don't know what it was, but there is something to how the intonation of your reading transcended the way that the page had initially presented a lot of this syntax and a lot of the way that language is used. And I am
Yeah.
so curious how you approach assonance, consonance, alliteration, just the words and letters themselves next to each other across the page.
Yeah.
I went to a Catherine Carter lecture one time, and she put up a poem that a mentor of hers had circled every letter that bounced, was the word, off of any other letter in the poem. And the whole the whole poem was scrawled out with scribbles and marks. And the point being that if you key in on any letter, you can just find music in every microsecond, every moment. And I'm curious if that's something that you consider as you draft, as you think and write.
So more now than I used to. But I think for me, it's one of those things where I'm always reading the poem out loud as I'm writing it. With this one, though, and this is maybe cheesy, but like it told me how it needed to be read. And it just sort of came in that when I was like, this is how it needs to be read. It has to have this sort of rhythm. And then just reading it out loud, realizing, you know, what sounded right and what sounds needed to go together. And some things I didn't even notice, but then realized later, a new set of gills fills out of me. So slippery, the gills fills and slippery. I was like, that's right. And then sometimes I think, at first I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But it's hard because you don't always, like, alliteration is a tricky one because you don't want to do too much. So just thinking about what sounds where can go together and create a sense of musicality. So I think a lot of it originally for me was by ear, and then later on going back and noticing more strategically, I think is the practice. So yeah.
Okay. Before I ask my question, does anyone else have any questions? Okay. So I put this in the chat. What came to me, and I think the word I kept feeling as you did this last poem, and your other poems were incredible as well, but this last poem, well, actually, a theme throughout all of them was this kind of idea of grief, but not only the grief of you losing your father, but the grief of bringing another life in. And I feel like there's something, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like there's something incredibly profound there because there's something that not only you're giving up, but you are, I don't know, but I just feel something incredibly, I feel incredibly touched and incredibly, like it feels incredibly prolific to me. Lumentum, Aslan, yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's incredible. So I guess the question is, how do you balance this life and death, well, not throughout your poetry, but also throughout your life? How are you balancing this grief?
Deleting Instagram from my phone, but
Yeah,
then realizing I need it to like be in touch with poetry friends.
that's real. That's real. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to do that.
Um, the birth, and like no one tells you that birth is trauma, and then it's like, wait, birthing bodies have been doing this for how long, and why do we not know this? Like, why was this information not shared with me? Right. And just this kind of sense of like, who am I now is a question that I've grappled with a lot. And I think the poems have been a way of processing both the grief of the loss of my dad, which also created this like new who am I now, and wanting to capture my inheritance and my heritage more so than I had before. And then that's tied in with the children also. But it's really, I don't know, you just take it a step at a time. But having the children, I think it's also hopeful. It's also, I think in some ways, and that's why the first poem, Migrant Phylogeny, I think in some ways, as gloomy as I think, well, I don't want to say that my poems are gloomy, but they're sad, right? They're coming from this place of brokenness in a way. But I do think they're in some ways like a love letter to my kids and also to my dad, as I'm attempting to understand them and what it means to be there for them and to be there for myself while holding space for them.
Exactly. I also think, I mean, I could feel the joy in the shark poem when you were listing off the names because children do that. They'll get a little hyperfixation and
Oh my God, yeah.
they will know every single shark. I have a cousin who knows every single dinosaur, and I absolutely love that. Um, Atia, I have to
I
thank you
have
again for
shark
your
poems.
incredible oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, you're lagging a little bit.
Oh no.
No worries though. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Everyone who came and went because we are 13 minutes over our time. Thank you, Atia, for reading. Suchita, who's not here right now. Thank you also, if you can see this from, our live in the future. Thank you guys again, and tune into our next reading, which it's September, I want to say 16th. Is that the correct date? That sounds right to me. I think that's it. We'll also post about it. Follow our Instagram, Poets and Pajamas. Okay, goodbye, everyone.